Hello and welcome back to Raised by Giants, where we talk all things spirituality. I'm Ryder Lee. Tonight we have returning guest Jay Weidner. But before I introduce him, check out Raised by Giants on Rokfin. It is a completely uncensored platform. Go over there, set up a free account. You'll get all of my regular content that I post on here and all of the other creators' content as well. And sign up for Rokfin's premium content, which is far less than a YouTube premium account. And you'll get all of my premium uncensored content when it gets released and all of the other creators premium content as well. Check the link in the description to sign up for the video streaming platform Rokfin. Also check out C60 Purple Power. It is the most powerful antioxidant on the planet. It helps with energy levels, skin problems, infections, eyesight, brain cognition, EMF radiation, and a lot more. It's a free radical sponge that gives your body the ability to heal itself. And if you use promo code GIANTS10 from the link in the description, you'll get 10% off your entire purchase. I highly recommend it. I've been using it for over a year now with my own money, and I would not recommend something that doesn't work. So without further ado, introducing tonight's returning guest, Jay Weidner. He's a renowned filmmaker, author, scholar, writer, and director, considered to be a modern day Indiana Jones for his ongoing worldwide quest to find clues to mankind's spiritual destiny via ancient societies and artifacts. He's been featured on the History Channel and has produced original content for Gaia TV. Hello and welcome back to the show, Jay. It's an honor and a privilege to have you back on, my friend. Really appreciate you. How are you doing?
Doing really good. Just wanted to show you my cat. This is Shakti. She takes C60 every day. She's almost 12. She was born during Fukushima on the West Coast when all the radiation was bombing the coast. So she was born outside, and she has thyroid problem, of course, because of the radiation. So we have to give her thyroid medicine every day. But she's a very healthy cat, but I've been giving C62 every day for the last 7 months. So I just want to introduce you to her. See you later, girl.
Yeah, that's awesome. C60 really helps with a lot of different things. They have all kinds of products on there now. They just released this roll-on skin product, and then they have these little gummies now that you don't have to drink the C60 if you're, if you can't drink oils, like straight oils, that you just take it's like a gummy vitamin.
Yeah, one of my good friends is the guy that produces all of that for Ken at Purple Power and for a lot of other people. He lives down near me, and he's like a mad genius chemist kind of guy.
Yeah, it's really incredible, the benefits of C60 Purple Power. But anyway, I'm really excited to speak with you here today. We have a lot of things to cover, and yeah. I was recently watching one of your interviews on your channel, and I found this really interesting about how you were talking about in the Vedas, right? That it states that the end of the last Kali Yuga, when Brahma exploded the sun, which I find really interesting because Brahma is a part of the Hindu trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And of course, we know that all religions have their trinities. But before Brahma exploded the sun, they created these ark ships and escaped to another planet, which was called Mahar, which is strikingly similar to Mars, right? And they lived underground, and they came back after the cataclysm is over, which makes so much sense because I've been saying for a really long time now, Jay, that they aren't really extraterrestrials or even gods in our ancient past. They're just highly advanced humans that left the planet to return again, right?
Yeah, they've kept secret and away from us in some undiscovered country, and they walk among us and play with us. They like Vegas, for instance, yeah, and then they know about the cycle. We know from the cross of Hendaye that they know about the cycle because the cross of Hendaye was made by a secret society talking about an exploding sun periodically. So. We know it happens. Dr. Schock of Boston University wrote a whole book about it. Came out about 6-7 years ago, showing the evidence that the Younger Dryas, the 1,500-year-long freezing cold period, ended about 12,000 years ago, ended with a CME or whatever a CME really is, because we really don't know. We've never really experienced one outside of the Carrington event in time, and that just fried the wires. A real CME that really hit us smack, I would say, is going to cause high winds, incredible thousands of lightning strikes a second, forests igniting on fire, all of it happening instantly. And what's curious is it may only happen on one side of the earth. So that's what's kind of curious about it, is that, it hits one side, and the other side gets out scot-free, but which side it gets hit and which side doesn't is, of course, a matter of conjecture. And there might even be long-term CMEs, coronal mass ejections, which go on for maybe days. We don't know enough about the sun. We've only had the SOHO satellite up, about 15 years, 16 years now. So we really don't know that much about what's really going on with the sun. And I would say that the chances are very good that a catastrophe is near, judging by the way the elites are acting right now. So the way they're scrambling, they're going for it and all the way. And they're, they got a secret space program base in Antarctica where they're lifting stuff up into orbit, and they're doing something, and it's something. And the other thing that's interesting about this Mahar and the giant arcs and all that is in Manly Hall's secret teachings. There's he has a lot of drawings and paintings in the book. And one of them, when he's talking about the Druids, there's a picture of the moon, and it says the Druids believed that the moon is the Ark of Noah, and that it came here with all of the the seeds of all life brought here. And in one of the Masonic books that I read years ago said that we came here from Sirius on the moon as an ark. So it may be that you can take the moon and take off to Mars or whatever, if it's still functional. I don't know if it is or not. But it is interesting how there are a number of sources, Druid sources and Freemasonic sources, and also South American tribal sources that say that the moon was shipped in here, that it came in here, that people on Earth saw it come in to orbit, and that so who knows? The fact that it's as big as the sun during an eclipse is a pretty astonishing coincidence, and it's almost like somebody parked it right in that position for that reason, for some reason. So that's also interesting, because if the moon was parked in front of the sun and there was a coronal mass ejection, what would happen? If so, you have the Earth, and then you have the moon, and you have the sun, right? And the sun blows out an ejection, but the moon just happens to be in between, right? Does it absorb the whole hit or a lot of the hit? And I'm going to say, yeah, I think it does. And I think that might be one of the reasons it's a shield against these solar explosions. And it's really the key to understanding the whole thing. Yes, there are comets that come in and blow things up, and there's meteorites that cause fires and things. But the real serious thing that we have to worry about is our sun burping and causing us devastation. And again, we don't know enough about it, not really. Haven't been following, but if you follow every religion, the sun is the major part of the religion, even Christianity.
Sun god worship. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jordan Maxwell used to cover that really well, how everything originally was a sun god worship. And the Aztecs, when they were sacrificing people to the sun, they were tearing their hearts out, and then they would lift the heart up to the sun. They say, please don't be angry with us today. We offer this to you. Please don't be angry with us. So they were afraid of an angry sun. And that's, of course, the panel on the cross of Hendaye facing the street in Hendaye, France, is the angry sun. It's like a sun with an angry look on his face. And and so, and then these things are all part of this underworld, underground lore also. So there, all over the world, there's this, talk of the people that live under the earth, right? The Hopi have, here near where I am, the Hopi have the ant people who came out of Mount Blanca. Mount Blanca has gigantic sand dunes underneath it. When geologists have examined the sand, they say it's silicate from inside a mountain. It didn't just blow here. It couldn't possibly have blown. It's too fine of a silicate. When they drilled down through the sand dunes, they found a forest underneath the sand dunes. And that forest was carbon dated at 12,000 years ago. So somebody, I think, hollowed out Mount Blanca in southern Colorado, and the sand dunes are the tailings of this process. And they did it 12,000 years ago, right before the Younger Dryas was ended by gigantic solar flare. So, and if you go to almost every culture, if you go to the Inca, they went underground to escape the catastrophe in the Andes. You look at the Tibetans; they have the same thing. They went underground in Tibet to get away from a disaster. All over the earth, there's these disaster stories. Some are about the sky burning up and everything, and then some are about flooding. But they're both, as Robert Schoch has shown us, they're both the same thing. So Fulcanelli says that the cross of Hendaye is talking about a double catastrophe that happened in the past, that will happen in the future. That double catastrophe, it was the first part of the catastrophe was a comet that entered into our atmosphere, broke up into 4 pieces. Then those 4 pieces broke up into multiple pieces, showered Canada and North America with thousands of hits, caused a nuclear winter. The skies went dark. We were thrown into the Younger Dryas for about 1,400 years. Then the second catastrophe was an ice built up. Seattle was under, I think it's 12,000 feet of ice. The Puget Sound had 12,000 feet of ice. Think about that. Just think about that. In fact, the Puget Sound is the result of that ice melting. It was a gigantic glacier, and it created Puget Sound. When it melted, you can get on the ferries in Seattle, and they'll have a whole thing showing you the ice sheet from 12,000 years ago and how the buildings are, the high rises, are just little tiny guys underneath this huge ice sheet, right? And so that will happen again. And so the Younger Dryas ends with this gigantic solar flare, and all that ice melts immediately. And this is what, like Randall Carlson is finding in Eastern Washington, the gigantic washout that occurred there, and you can find it everywhere. Actually, if you start looking, where I live has been hit by gigantic floods. I do drone footage, and I can see the damage that some incredible force happened some time ago and pushed just literally thousands of tons of dirt in all directions, clearly done by water, massive amounts of water. The San Luis Valley had a gigantic, 12,000 years ago, it had a 2,000 foot high glacier in the valley. The whole valley was just a glacier, a gigantic glacier that melted probably when the solar flare hit. So we're really kind of getting a grip via ancient societies and modern science on exactly what is the periodic catastrophe. And the elites know this and are preparing for it. Everything that they do is what the Bill Gates' seed bank in Norway, everything that you see them doing. And they know that when the brown poop hits the spinning blade, that if there's a whole lot of people out here in the world, they're going to raid their houses, okay? So they're not going to be safe. So it's incumbent on them to reduce the tension you might say. And by reducing the tension, you're reducing the amount of folks. So so that's what's going on that front, which again, it all plays into the same thing. They're not building a high tech world that they say they're building. If they were doing that, we would have to be, every single kid in America would have to be studying STEM. Every kid would have to start studying engineering and science, and they're doing the opposite. They're not teaching it. They're pulling it back. The parents have to go find it elsewhere outside of the school system to get a decent education. So they're not planning on building some high-tech future. We don't have the workers to do it. And don't tell me that the robots are going to build robots. Entropy wins always, and you cannot deny physics, and everything runs down. Everything, all machines run down the minute that they start. They're beginning the process of running down. The minute that you come out of the womb, you're starting to run down, and that's the way it is. And so you can say that their evidence, like the WEF is saying, oh, we're going to build this great future, nobody's going to have to work, and but if you actually look at the evidence for, are they actually building this future, the answer is no, they're not. They're not doing it at all. In fact, they're throwing us into chaos. And that's another thing I want to talk about, because whether the world, we have a solar flare or whatever, but you have to assume that everything's going to go on, and that the solar flare isn't going to happen. You just have to assume that, because you have to take care of your family and yourself. And remember, you have to take care of yourself first, then your family, then your community. That's exactly the order you have to do it. You can't help anybody until you help yourself.
It's also really interesting that you brought up the Hopi prophecy and these ant people coming up from underneath the ground to grab people to take them underneath the earth when a catastrophe is happening, because what Anunnaki means in Hopi is ant people.
Yep.
Right. So they're all the same thing. They're all the same beings. And also when you think about, all these big underground military bases that they've been building, these big domes, I think that that's really what they are preparing for. And that's what all these were used for. And whenever
Denver Airport,
whenever in 2020, whenever they were like, oh yeah, we're going in and taking out all these dumbs, we're clearing them out. Well, they're clearing them out for a different reason. They're not clearing them out to actually help with anything. They're clearing them out to make room for themselves.
Yeah. So there'll be, there's probably, I don't know how many strategic lines of defense that they're forming. So the dumbs are one of them. The secret space program is another one. There's probably ones we don't know about. So they have, so the super elite will take off in the secret space program. The managers will be in the dumbs. And I think the rest of us will be more or less, have to fend for ourselves. If you do have any mines nearby your house, I would definitely go out and scope them out. And if they have a grate over them, you need to figure out how you're going to cut that grate so you can get in there in case there is a kind of coronal mass ejection, because you will be safe under the earth. If you get under the earth, you will be safe. So, and anyway, I don't really like to cause fear. I don't really, I believe we can create a positive future. And I don't think that, I know from the evidence that they're not really building their high-tech society. So then you have to ask yourself, well, what are they building? And basically they're building escape routes for themselves. And then they want to more or less leave us to kind of, they think, a Mad Max kind of thing, right? I think that's what they think. Well, because they think we're all stupid bumpkins, and I say we are not. And so I think that that I think I've said it on the show before. We know what the Piscean age was like. All we have to do is read our history, and we know that it's top down. it's centralization, it's murder and killing, it's conquering, it's colonizing. So we know that's what the Piscean age is. Okay, we got it. All right, but what's the Aquarian age? We've now moved past the barrier. We're now going into Aquarius. What's the Aquarian age? Well, we don't know. We don't really know. It's been 26,000 years since last time we were in the age of Aquarius. So what I say is that it's up to us to make the Aquarian age. And to quote Rahm Emanuel, never let a good crisis go to waste. So we have a crisis, a very big worldwide crisis that every day gets worse and worse. Everything is breaking down. Okay. I have a food dealer in my area, and their cooling system broke down and they lost all their food, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of food, because they couldn't find a part to fix the cooling system. Nor could they find the guy to come fix it either. So it was twofold catastrophe on them, right? They couldn't get the part, and then they couldn't find anyone that would do it, right? Because apparently had to fly him in from out of town because it was a very difficult fix. So what we have to do is say, okay, what is the Aquarian age? Well, I would say, judging from what I'm seeing happening at the beginning of the Aquarian age, is we're going to decentralize. We're going back into small communities. We're going to grow our own food. I grew 35 quarts of sauerkraut this summer. I think probably cost 45 cents in seeds, something like that. If you go to the store to buy organic sauerkraut, a quart, it's going to cost you $12. Okay. So also tomatoes, tomatoes are skyrocketing. We grew tons of tomatoes. So there's no such thing as scarcity. And they're telling us that there is, but there isn't. You can do it, and everyone can do it.
Have you seen that the USDA is now asking people to register their vegetable gardens in a national database?
Yeah, that's going to go over like a lead balloon. No, it's actually, if they enacted the laws, then there are actually laws, especially in Colorado, you can't garden. You can't have a garden, period. Not at all. That's the law on the books. You cannot use the state's water. It's the state's water. It's not yours, even if it's on your property, and you can't use it without the state giving you permission. So, I mean, that's a heady law, but it's on the books. I bet it's in almost all the Western states that have water problems has that kind of law in the books. So, but the other thing is that can the law enforcement really enforce anything? So let's just take a worst case scenario. Let's say gas goes to $15 a gallon. Well, my sheriff's not even going to be able to come to our town anymore. He's not going to be able to afford it. He's got a budget that he got appropriated a year ago. He has so much he can spend. And that's it. Once he'll be out of money by the 10th day of the month, gas money. Right. So, and so even government people coming to your door to ask you questions and things, they're not going to have any money to do it. So everything's going to grind to a giant halt is what's going to happen. And we're all going to have to fend for ourselves. We're going to have to learn how to administer first aid. We're going to have to learn how to garden. We're going to have to learn how to teach kids mathematics and stuff, because it's all going to be homeschooling. You're not going to be able to drive your kids to school if gas goes to a certain place, and they seem determined to go that distance, because I mean, they're not opening up any of the oil fields or anything here in America. So we're heading towards this kind of slow motion disaster that either our leaders are too stupid to realize what's going on, or they're doing it on purpose. I don't know which.
I vouch for on purpose, but based on the evidence and based on everything that's happening, they're definitely doing it on purpose. But you brought up the Aquarian Age in there, and to me, the Aquarian Age is a period of time where knowledge is meant to be freely given, right, and not suppressed.
That's right.
And I think what the dark side is attempting to do, the controllers and manipulators of our reality, is to get us so dark and controlled that the dark stays cemented here through the next stage, through the age of Aquarius, right through the next golden age, or what I like to call, and I've termed it as a God age. I'm not saying that gods exist, because I don't believe that they do. I believe it's just advanced humans, but a God age in the terms that we get an age where knowledge is freely given, right? And it's
and that's happening. I mean, the thing, there's a lot of revolutionary fronts that can't be stopped, and so when we move into the age of Aquarius fully, we will abandon all the Piscean traits that we had. And the people that are already in Aquarius, who feel like they're Aquarians like me, we have rejected the Piscean stuff years ago. All of it, all the control functions and everything. And so that's why I find things like Bitcoin so promising, because it actually could create a currency that we all could use that's free of centralized banking control. And people say, well, everybody will know what everybody's doing. And that's exactly what will happen in the age of Aquarius. Everyone will know what everybody's doing. It's free information. Everyone will know. You're not going to be able to hide. And I'm perfectly fine. If they look on my bill and they see that I spend, $100 a month on high quality pot, I don't care, So, there's nothing that I care that they see on my ledger. So I'm not doing anything. I'm not going to steal anybody's money or do any kind of corruption. And I think that is kind of the leavening thing that's going to happen in the age of Aquarius. We're going to be able to be more honest with each other. And I think, even the sexual stuff that's going on right now with people saying that they're different genders and all that, I think that's a little bit of a mental illness issue. But I also think that it's good that we're finally talking about this stuff, because it was so suppressed my whole life that nobody could even talk about it. So I don't think children should be involved in the discussion, but I think it's good that us adults start talking about things that have not been talking about. And I mean, all of it, including the PEDO stuff, all of it come out. Let it all come out. Let's see it. Let's have a group consensus on what exactly is going on here, but no more hiding it. And the Piscean age was all secrets, and this is not secrets anymore. I wish this fly would quit bugging me. And
the only problem that I really have with the whole transgender and all that, like, people can do whatever they want, right? Yep. They can say that they are who they are, whatever. But I'm under the suspicion that it's not something that develops naturally. No. It's something that's been fed into us. It's either in our food, it's in the air, it's in the water, and we've been poisoned to that degree and confused as to what we are, right? And that's the problem that I have with it. If this was something that naturally developed and didn't have anything to do with any thing that they were injecting into us or feeding us or that we're eating or that they're spraying in the air, then so be it. But I see it as a manufactured thing.
It would be very interesting to find out, people, like, it would be great to do a survey of people who live a fairly pure life, right? Eat all organic and don't take anything, given to them by the medical establishment, and then check their kids and see if if there's a less preponderance of this stuff. I remember when I don't want to use his name, but AJ came out about 8 or 9 years ago and said it was the frogs. Remember? Yeah. Everybody laughed at him. Everybody was screaming in laughter. And I think he actually may have been right to a certain degree. I do believe that if you flood yourself with estrogen, which is what they do with these pesticides, they're estrogen based. So they attract in the male and, they die, they eat the poison and die. I would say that a high estrogen amount of estrogen in your diet does two different things. It causes males to become more feminine. We know that's for sure. But what's interesting is that an overdosing of estrogen in females actually causes them to become more masculine. You're overdosing, so they start producing testosterone to counter the overdosing of the estrogen. So, and it's kind of exactly what we see going on.
And with the fluoride too, the fluorides in all of our regular tap water too makes children develop way faster than they should be developing. That's why someone in the 6th grade nowadays looks like they're 18. But back in the day, even 20 years ago, they looked their age. Right? It's because of the water and the food that they're eating and drinking.
Yeah, I have a friend who's got a daughter who's, I think she just turned 15 and she looks like she's 19. It's like, what's going on here? Right. Yeah. And I was like, and shocking because it happened quickly. I mean, she went from just a little squirt to, it's like, what happened, overnight, just about. So yeah, there's something going on in that. And the powers that be want to create the Piscean age to make sure it stays here because they're the ones in charge of it. But it will slip away, and they are going to be cornered dogs eventually. And cornered dogs are the worst of all animals. You don't want to face them. And so I think that's where we're headed. And what I also see going on is a lot of people are just saying, you know what? I'm not even going to pay attention to anything they're doing. And they're just kind of going off into their own little bubble. They're growing their own food, raising animals, and their kids, and they're not watching the news. And you go to talk to them about something, they have no idea what you're talking about, and that's an interesting thing, too. Is people who have actually just divorced themselves completely from the reality around us, and they seem very, very happy, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the way that I think to do it, is to create your own personal reality and not pay, because if we didn't have the media, they would not have been able to pull this whole thing off. They just wouldn't have. That's the psychological manipulation of this whole thing. And it was all psychological here. There was no boots on the ground type of scenario like there was in other countries, right? It was all psychological manipulation. The United States has spent more money on psychological manipulation than any other country in the world.
Yeah.
And that's done through the media, that's done through the news, that's done through the things that you watch on your television, that's done through the movies, that's done through the TV shows, and that's how they control and manipulate us. If we didn't have television the way that we have it, then they would not have gotten away with the things that they have gotten away with. That's like their biggest weapon, I think, anyway, because if we didn't have that, we would just be normally living our lives, right? And we would be going out and congregating with each other, and no one would know that this was happening on a worldwide scale or even a country scale.
Yeah, I think the singer formerly known as Knye has been saying a lot of interesting things lately about that, and he clearly was under the umbrella of that mind control for many, many years. And I think he probably, he crawled out from under it now. He thinks he crawled out from under it. We don't know. But he is at least saying some things that are very interesting. And you got to read what he says, all of it, because, he may not be with us for much longer, and who else may not be with us for much longer, and they really need to start watching their backs, and that's Harry and Meghan. I hear that they did a show for Netflix in which they unloaded, and then when they went to Elizabeth's funeral, Charles took them aside and said, "If you say anything about us, blah, 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 blah." And, you would think after what happened to his mom that Harry would learn, but hey, what do I know? But anyway, yeah. So we're there is no opposition. Okay, it's all controlled. Putin is controlled, and I hate to say it, Trump is controlled, and there is no opposition. All the opposition, if it was real, is not with us anymore. And so even I hate to say this, I'm not going to say their names, but even the people that have been around for a while that do conspiracy stuff, that are, so some of them got kicked off in 2018, deplatformed. Even those people, I think, are pretty much all controlled, all of it. And the reason I say that is because they never actually say who is doing this. If they do, they're wrong when they say it. So it's like, wait a minute, it's pretty obvious who's doing this to us. Why don't you just say it? If you're going to come out here and tell us that you're giving us the truth, then give us the truth. But they won't. And so that's how I can tell that, So about 2.5 months ago, Cliff High came out with a bunch of stuff. I think it's on Rumble. Can't remember now. BitChute. He has a show on BitChute. And he came out with a bunch of stuff that I have been researching for years and years and years, right? And I was really glad that he came out with it, right? And I wrote to him, I said, dude, you're going to get it. You can't say this stuff, right? You're right on that razor's edge where you're going to slip and fall. And he said, I don't care anymore, I'm whatever, 68 or whatever. And so, and he has been getting shit, but he's still doing it. So keep it up, Cliff. Cliff is actually telling us who's doing it, how they're doing it. And I'm not going to say it on the show because I'll get kicked off. But you can go over and type in Cliff High on BitChute and watch his stuff. And he stopped about a month ago. Anything more than a month to 3 months ago is really good. And he's really laying it all out, all about the mafia that's running things and how they do it and their place in history and where they are and how much they depend on the monetary system for their success. And
yeah, this is what I've really discovered, Jay, is that a lot of this community and the conspiracy community is just like the mainstream, but just in a different way. And when people in this community come out and they actually start talking about truth and not making it about a boogeyman that nobody can see, yep, then you create opposition in this community, just like you create opposition whenever you talk about different stuff in the mainstream, right? It's the exact same thing here, just in a different way. And I've really realized that a lot here recently.
Yeah, it's really true. And, with the, let's talk about that. So there's this guy, his initials are AJ, and he just got found guilty of something in a civil case where he has to pay a lot of money out to people, right? And it was a curious case reading it because he never really defended himself. And I found that very odd because there is a lot of evidence that he could have used. There's a FBI murder statistics for 2012 for that area of the country in Connecticut, and it says 0 murders for 2012 in that area of Connecticut. So I don't know. He could have used evidence, but he didn't, and that makes me think there must be something else going on. But what it did do is put a big, huge freeze on anybody speculating about any crimes that are going on, right? I'm not going to speculate. I used to be a great speculator on criminal activity now, but I'm going to refrain from it, And by the way, when that event took place at that high school in 2012, somebody on the left wrote an article where they said that I was one of the people spreading that story. But if you actually go to the radio show that he quoted me from, I was actually saying, no, be careful. This could be a trap. I was telling everybody to be careful, don't go out and start speculating, because I was hearing all those people that we were talking about, speculating about. I'm going, no, they took my quote out of context. And so the beginning is, hey, no, don't guys ever do that. And then I said something, and then they took that quote without the following quotations and made it look like I said it. And then I wrote to the guy, he writes for Salon, and I sent him the radio show and the transcript and everything. And I asked for an apology, and he wouldn't write me back. So, that was when I really realized how manipulative the left wing, I suppose right wing is too, media is. So.
Yeah, it's really interesting here whenever because I've recently redefined my whole idea surrounding aliens and extraterrestrials and the
Good.
secret space program and like all the stuff and UFOs, right?
Yeah.
And whenever you start coming out and talking about that kind of stuff, what it really is.
Ooh,
right?
they hate it.
They hate it. They cannot handle it. And then you start getting attacked and then you get reported and then this whole entire thing starts happening. But that's the truth of it, right? But they want to mystify this entire thing, right? They want to turn it into beings from outside of our solar system coming here, traveling in UFOs, when we've had the technology for decades now. And it's just us. It's us in our military. The extraterrestrials aren't extraterrestrials. They're actual advanced humans, and they're not here in physical bodies. Anybody that's being contacted by any extraterrestrials is never physical. No one has ever seen a physical ET, not that I'm aware of.
They never proved that they were ETs. They tell you that they've met them. I've met many people that tell me they've met ETs, but how do you know it's an ET? Right? There's a famous book called Martin. It's called The Controllers, and you can get it online on PDF. It came out about 30 years ago, and it's all about this, about how Barney Hill, when he first got hypnotized, he got abducted with his wife Betty in the 1960s. But when he first got hypnotized, he said they were military. It's really important. He changed the story, but the first one was the military. He said, in quote, they looked like they were some kind of Nazis. And then he said that he talked to a guy who had red hair and he was from Tennessee. He had a Southern accent. And so you start looking at these incidences, and over, you see like grotesque manipulation, right? And so, I love Whitley Strieber. He's a great friend of mine, and I've been on his show and everything. But you have to wonder if his experiences were really real, or were they some kind of projection, that was happening, a three-dimensional projection, or because they can do anything, man. Yeah. I knew these people. They were out having a picnic in the woods in Central California. And they looked up and they saw an orange ball in the sky above them, right, in the blue sky. And the orange ball grew and grew and grew until it was huge. And then it turned into like a devil's face and morphed. And then like its mouth moved and everything. And then it just slowly dissipated, right? And they came to me because I'm somewhat famous. And they came to me and said that they saw this. And it was like 6 people. And they all said they saw it, right? So that's pretty interesting. And so this is maybe 2 months after the incident, right? So then I asked him, I said, any of you guys been visited by anybody strange in the last 2 months? And every one of them had an encounter with a stranger who was asking odd questions about him. And I was like, okay, so it was a mind control experiment. They knew you were there. They saw you there. They ID'd you. Then they did their little hologram or whatever it was. Then they had a follow-up with you to find out what effect it had on you. And they all agreed with me that that's exactly what it was. So, yeah, and they've been doing it a long time. I mean, we know from accounts in Egypt from the hieroglyphs. It says that Akhenaten was walking, he had just become emperor or pharaoh, and he was walking down the Nile River, and he looked up, he saw a silver disc in the sky above him. The silver disc began talking to him and told him to start a new religion, which he did. And he killed and murdered, thousands and thousands of people that were in the old religion. Muhammad was in a cave, hiding out from a rainstorm while herding his sheep, when a silver being appeared. It said that it was the angel Gabriel, and downloaded the entire Quran to him. He couldn't read or write, but he remembered it verbatim. Went home and told his wife about the whole incident. She could read and write, and so she wrote it down. And that's how that got started. Over and over and over again, we see it. There's this guy in Indonesia named Subud. He's dead now. But in the 1930s, he was walking around in Indonesia at night, and he saw a UFO. The UFO came right over his head, shocked him with fire inside. He almost thought he was burning up. He passed out. He woke up. He started a UFO religion called the Subud, all right? Obama's mom joined that religion when Obama was 5 years old, took Obama to Indonesia, where she studied with Subud. And Obama, the 44th president of the United States, grew up in a UFO cult, okay? And that is super secret, hidden. Not to mention that Obama looks exactly like Subud, all right? They look exactly like each other. I'm not going to go any further than that, but if you look at the origins of the Black nationalist group, Louis Farrakhan's group, right? That was, again, as a UFO. The founder, I forget his name now. I'm sure you guys will remember him. Real flamboyant guy that died in the 60s. He got abducted by a UFO, and it told him to start this whole religion. And so over and over, we see religions are being created by UFO inhabitants, right? And why would that be? Why would it be? And again, you go back to ancient Vedic texts, and the gods would live in these caves, and you would have to bring your cow up to the mouth of the cave as a sacrifice to the god. You'd have to leave a basket of corn or wheat or something, and it would be gone the next day. Where'd it go? Well, they came and took it. Of course, that's how you sacrifice, or taking it. Same thing with there was in the 1500s in England. There was a Sunday. It was a cold, snowy day, and everybody was packed into church. There was like 200 people in the church in this small town in England, and they heard this cow start mewling really loud, and so they all ran outside to see what was going on, and they all saw it. 200 people said a silver disc with a cable coming out from the bottom, had it wrapped around the cow's torso, and was lifting the cow up into the ship. Here in the San Luis Valley, we're the home of cattle mutilations. And what do people see? They see ships landing, and then they find mutilated cattle. All right. But cattle also go missing here too a lot. And they actually go missing a lot all over the world. Cows are missing. How many people have reported hiking in the woods and seeing a UFO fly over a lake and suck up a whole bunch of water and fly away? It's over and over we see it. And you're right, and that's what it is. It's a high-tech society that's been here for a long, long time. They probably had their high-tech forever. They pick certain groups of humans out to initiate into being their servants. But they and they probably scare the living daylights out of them in some way to make sure that they never get out of line. And that's how the whole thing works. And it's always been that way.
When you think about it, it's the perfect cover too, right? You just blame it on extraterrestrials from people outside of our planet.
Martin Cannon. His name is Martin Cannon. He wrote a book called The Controllers. You can get the PDF. It's all about this. He disappeared, by the way, after he wrote this book. He got so much crap when he put this book out. It's just a little book. You can read it like 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And he got so much crap because I know the publisher, he's long gone now, but I knew the publisher of that book. And he said that Martin Cannon got so much crap that he went to one conference. He got invited to one conference to talk about the controllers, the book. And he could not talk because his life got threatened by everybody because he was not buying the alien line. He was saying that these are humans. And he disappeared. You cannot find Martin Cannon anywhere. He's flat off the face of the earth. He's gone. And Martin, if you're out there, I'd love to talk to you. And so over and over and over again, we see this. And a lot of the sightings are not ships either. A lot of the sightings are just plasma, just balls of plasma that come out of the earth and fly around. And that's what happens right around in southern Colorado. A lot of people think they're seeing silver glowing ships, but they're just plasma balls. If you type in UFOs in YouTube and watch the videos that are there, 90% of them are just plasma balls. They're bluish, pinkish, reddish, and they're kind of floating around. And that's just plasma. It's natural earth energy that's just coming out at certain places where granite is tightly pushed together, causing a electric shoot to happen, and that lights up the plasma, and for a while it stays intact, and then slowly it dissipates and disappears. I've seen many of them. The Marfa lights in Texas, in Marfa, Texas. You can go there, pull out your Chase Lounge, open up a beer. About midnight, they show up. They stay up until about 4 a.m, and they're lights. You can photograph them and see them on YouTube. So, then there's also living entities of plasma that live in the atmosphere around us that we can't see. So, and there's also multi-dimensional aspects of all of this. So if you have taken, a heavy dose of DMT or a heroic dose of mushrooms like Terence McKenna would advocate, you're going to meet entities. You're going to have conversations with them. That doesn't mean that they're physically in the room with you, but I've had many conversations with entities. I've met the machine elves. I actually have chronicled these entities, and I have names for them, and they show up and they have their own features, their own characteristics, their own kind of vocal style, and they seem sentient and conscious to me, but they didn't come from outer space. So the Earth is a ball in space, and it's surrounded by this huge, going out way past the moon, cloud of plasma. Scientists would call it dark matter because they don't know what they're talking about. All right. Every planet that's alive has electromagnetic field has this thing. And this is an ocean of plasma. And it has plasma beings in it. It has different spheres of being, so you can move out. And maybe there are extraterrestrials coming from other planets. But the other thing that has to be said, and this will also not win me any friends, we now know that outer space is really dangerous, really dangerous. NASA couldn't admit it during the Apollo fakery, but now they totally admit that they can't go past low Earth orbit. And the thing is that there's so much radiation out there that you couldn't get to the Mars. Even if Musk built his ship and it took off, and even if we're going at a pretty good clip, say they got there in 30 days, which is not possible right now. Let's say they got there in 30 days, they'd be fried by the time they got to Mars, completely fried. And so I just, I think we're stuck here. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think we have what we should be doing is building colonies on the bottom of the ocean if we want to do this kind of stuff, this kind of high tech wizardry, but we're not gonna I don't know. They say that you need 2 meters thick of lead around you to not get hit by the radiation. So if you had a big arc like the moon, which has a 20-mile deep, shell, right? They say that there's a shell on the moon about 20 miles. then, and you're living inside, then you could get around in outer space and be fine. But and also you could hollow out asteroids. So you could go get it. What you would do is you go get an asteroid, right? If you could get out there without radiation, and then you heat it up and you put a tube in the center, and just like blowing glass, you blow it up after it's hot, and you create a cavernous inside. Now you could live in that and be safe from the radiation. But you can't with just, 1/4-inch thin panels be safe from radiation, which is why I know the astronauts never went to the moon, because the amount of shielding that they had was ridiculous. It was about the thickness of aluminum foil.
Well, they for sure did not go to the moon in standard rocketry. 100%. Not possible. Doesn't work like that.
No.
And not only that, the radiation, but all of the debris in space too. The space rocks. Like, imagine hitting, like, a little pebble would completely destroy your craft. Like in a standard rocketry craft, you're driving around in space, flying around in space.
Hit by a bullet.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
it would never make it.
Yeah, there's no resistance in space. So a rocket could just fly at a high velocity and hit you and blow your whole thing out. That's why I wonder about, like, the space station, the ISIS space station. If you ever look at it, it's like a tubes, right? Connected, but they don't have any doors that block. So if this part of the tube gets hit by a pebble, right, and blows it open, the whole thing's going to decompress. There's no way for them to shut one area off to fix the problem. It's like, see, why would they design something like that? I mean, it's truly curious. It really is.
Did you see that? Did you see that video of them at the space station, and they're trying to close the hatch, and the hatch is super flimsy, like a screen door?
Yeah.
It's just like waving, and I'm like, what is that? What are they doing?
I don't know. I mean, I can't believe that they would, because you would never build a submarine where the whole sub would flood with one hit. You would always have the doors you could shut off and stop the flooding from the whole thing. But this thing, if they get a hole in that thing, it's going to go completely. I don't know if they've got some emergency repair thing that they do or what, but so I don't know. I don't know what to make about the space station. I really don't. I wouldn't be up there. I know that. So I think that what's it called? It's a term in the spiritual world. It's called it's where a thought becomes reality. Shoot, I'm gonna forget the name of it, but there's this thing.
Manifestation.
It's not a manifestation. It's a I'll probably come up with the word. It's an odd word, but what it is that it's that you think of something. Egregore, thank you. You think of something and it manifests into reality. So the Tibetans would say that you can create a duplicate of yourself in the spirit world, right? Egregore, that in the spirit world. And so we've created egregores like the orcs from Lord of the Rings, or like egregore, right? And all the monsters that inhabit our fantasy land, and the angels too, are like egregores. There are enough people have thought that it was real that it became kind of real. And that's what happened here. He put out a story. A bunch of people thought it was real. A bunch of people began thinking that they also had these experiences, and because of the egregore, and this shows you how dangerous it is to put out stuff that isn't true. This is why you don't do it. This is why every religion on earth says you can't lie. It's because the lie is so damaging. How many people have been damaged mentally by all of this? I was at a conference in beginning of 2020, right before the virus hit, and I told everybody, I did a speech at the conference. I told everybody I didn't believe any of it, right? And I had at least 3 people, all women, coming up to me with tears in their eyes saying, "You're a horrible person for saying that you don't believe him, and he's telling the truth, and he really did this," and and they were mentally stressed out by it, right? And I was like blown away because I have like ability to like step out of myself and watch people from a third person angle, and I was like, wow, you're so emotionally invested in this, and so he's going to pay the piper, the karma piper. That's where this is all headed. And I hope he doesn't do anything too dramatic.
See, I think that the SSP and then what people talk about in the SSP is another cover-up, just like the aliens and the UFOs are a cover-up as well, hiding the real thing that's going on. That there is a real secret space program. It's just very rudimentary. And they hide that by these crazy, fantastical stories that they're going around in space and fighting aliens on other planets.
I mean, who has done more damage to the credibility of the idea that there's a secret space program? I mean, who you sound like a fool. I won't even do a show on it. Okay. Because I look like a complete fool. I mean, I'd like to do a show like with Richard Dolan, talking about the discovery of zero G in the 50s and how it progressed into ships. Another thing about all of this, the UFO sightings all started right after we perfected
World War II.
Yeah, right. It's like, no, there were UFOs, but the mass sightings didn't start until then. And the guy that saw him over Mount Rainier, what was his name? He said that they were plasma. He later said that those were plasma balls, and that's the plasma balls love volcanoes. They like all that pressure and stuff. And people see plasma balls all the time coming out of volcanoes. Mount Rainier's a volcano, so it's like so the one size fits all explanation for all of this doesn't work, and everyone's trying to make that the way it is. There's many different explanations, but as far as the secret space program, I totally agree with you. I think that it was it is a what I think is that they're building a gigantic ship above Antarctica. And I think that they don't have to worry about the Van Allen belts, the radiation in Antarctica, so they can take off from Antarctica. And that's really what's going on, why they cover everything up down there. You can't fly over Antarctica. You can fly to the South Pole, but this doesn't have to be, this would probably be an underground base. So, it would not be above ground. It would be underground for heating purposes and just energy storage, and with nuclear power plants and the whole thing. And then they use zero G. They open up the hood. It's all painted white, right? So it blends with the snow. The flying saucer takes off, goes up into space, does whatever they're doing in space. I have night vision goggles. I can tell you, out here in the middle of the country, I can go out at night and I see these guys flying around. All right. They're out there. They're flying around in their ships, and I can see them. And you can too. Just get Gen 3 night vision goggles and you'll see them too. Even in the city, you'll see them. Yep. And so there is a secret space program. It's a very interesting subject. I've talked to people that are in it. Reagan even kind of wrote about it in one of his memoirs, about how the scientists told him that they're building a ship that would get 300 people up into space, right? And he's like, what? 300 people? What are you talking about? Right? Well, you probably can, but it's not. And they want people to go around making it sound like a crackpot operation. That's what they want. They want it to sound that way so that anyone with half a brain stays as far away from the subject as they possibly can. Is exactly what happened. So now you can't even talk about it anymore. He can trademark it all he wants because nobody wants to talk about it anymore, right? It's become a verboten subject by everybody. I don't think anybody that I know from Jimmy Church on wants anything to do with the subject. So,
yeah, it was a genius move on their end to really cover it up, and because it really has taken away from the research side of it. People back 20 years ago were actually researching this really, really well, and they were getting somewhere. And then all of a sudden, all of these secret space program whistleblowers and assets start popping up.
Yep. So in 2015, in October, there was a secret space conference in outside of Austin, Texas, and I went. And it was Joe Farrell, Richard Dolan, dark journalist, incredible lineup. Jay Dyer, it's an incredible lineup, right? And the deepest drill down discussion of all of this I'd ever seen in my life. You can get those videos, watch them. They're really good. I hosted the first panel on Friday night, and there was no experiencers. These were just hard, cold researchers. None of us had ever been into the secret space program. We just examined the evidence to see if there is this, and we concluded that definitely there is, right? Oh, we had, what's his name? Walter
Bosley.
Bosley, and he was in the AFOSI, the Air Force Office of Special Investigation. That's the Men in Black. That's who the Men in Black are. They're OSI. So we had an OSI guy telling us that there's a secret space program, right? That he has evidence of it, and that it had been going on for a long time. He'd been going back to California in the 1870s. These Germans were working on this stuff using red mercury, just like the Vimanas from ancient India used red mercury.
Yep, so the Sonora Club. Yep, James Delshaw and Peter Minnis.
Yeah, and so what the red mercury is, it's creating they're rotating it, right, really fast, and it's creating a plasma cloud, an anti-gravity plasma cloud around the thing. That's why it glows blue. That's why if UFOs wanted to hide themselves, why would they glow, right? Why would they have lights on them? I mean, they'd paint them black, right? No lights, right? But they don't. And they can't, because you can see UFOs because they're using this technology, which uses the hull of the ship as its motor, almost a drive for it to be able to drive in whatever direction they want. That's become the verboten thing now. We can't talk about it. So even if the great channeler, didn't have to go to court and admit that it was channeling and kept up the whole pretense of being in it, nobody cares anymore. So you would be going downhill anyway. So even if none of this had happened, you'd still be going downhill because he is the one that destroyed the subject. It got so way out, nobody could believe it. And then when he declared that he freed all the slaves in the galaxy in, when was that? I think it was in December 2017. He declared that he got taken to a conference and he declared that we must free all the slaves in the galaxy, and a standing ovation from all the aliens. Yeah, glory, glory, glory. I was like, oh my God. I was in the control room, so ready to vomit. But yeah.
Yeah, it's so fantastical. And I admit, in the very beginning, before I knew, anything about it, I think I was kind of like everyone else. I was a little bit fooled, but something really did not seem right about it. There was something that I just couldn't put my finger on. And then whenever this whole thing, blew my mind, that, that I knew that we had this technology for a really long time. Just talking about like how Walter Bosley talked about, and we just spoke about the Sonora Club back in the mid 1800s using the technology. And then the Germans were developing a very similar technology in Germany during World War II with their Bellcraft. And they were using a different kind of mercury. I believe that the kind of mercury they were using in Germany was red, and then Delshaw and Peter Minnis was using like a green mercury, but it's still the same thing, right? And all of these abductions, all the UFO sightings did not start happening until after World War II, right? We have all these events that happened right after World War II. We got the Roswell event of 1947, then we got the Washington Flap event of 1962, and then you got the Kecksburg event, which looks very similar to the Bellcraft that was in Germany that crashed in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania.
So also the one in England at the Air Force Base. Again, when they describe it, it looks just like a thing. And the guy had radiation burns. Yeah, you touch the hull of a red mercury powered plasma vehicle, you're going to have radiation burns. I guarantee it. So over and over and over and over again, you see the same fingerprints, the same kind of thing going on. And there were abductions before World War II. But people thought that they were the fairies and stuff that were abducting their kids. But what were the fairies, really? And what were these elemental beings that were doing things to people from the fairy tales? What really were they? And Jacques Vallée talks all about that in his great book, Dimensions, about how we're in a multi-dimensional world. And sometimes, depending on the situation, you're going to slip into another dimension where everything is different, but it's not alien. It's Earth. And all the great spiritual traditions, by the way, talk about that, about how the Earth is a multi-dimensional place where you can experience different realities.
Yeah, I heard Graham Hancock talk about that at one of his conferences at the Gaia-sphere that I went to, and he talked about how back in ancient times, like there was like these abductions by fairies, by demonic-looking entities, succubuses, incubuses, and all this that would visit people in the middle of the night and basically abduct them. Yeah.
Yep, it happens, and it's been going on, But again, none of those people are claiming that they're aliens. Here's the other thing about aliens. We're going to piss off a lot of people with this conversation. I can tell you that.
I love it. Let's go.
You can't even go to Bali without getting a shot, because your immune system isn't set up for a jungle type environment, and you'll get sick. Right. So they give you vaccinations on all this. Right. Well, if a being that had not grown up on Earth suddenly came to Earth without a protective covering of some kind, they would be killed almost instantly. Their immune system would be attacked by 100 trillion different kinds of organisms just waiting for them without the prior, required, living in your environment and getting a natural immunity to things. So even that's really questionable. So the more you look at it, the more you think about it, the less likely it is to be that. But that doesn't mean that a multi-dimensional entity can't come over to this side and give us really good information. Yeah. That can happen.
That whole factor that you're talking about, how they wouldn't have the immune system to survive here, that's the biggest reason why I don't think that there are any physical ETs on the planet, unless the only way that they can be physical extraterrestrials, which does not make them extraterrestrial, is that if they're indigenous to the planet, is if they were either created here or that they've been here for a really long time. That's the only way that I can see that there are any physical 3D reality aliens here on the planet. But again, that doesn't make them aliens. That makes them terrestrial. That makes them from the Earth.
Yeah. So when I was at Gaia, we went down to Peru and we got the Nazca Mummy, right? We procured the Nazca Mummy. The Nazca Mummy has 3 fingers. It's got a completely different shape face. It's small. It's only about 4.5 feet tall, but it was alive. It was a human being, had DNA and a skeleton and all of that. And, but it was a human being. We did the DNA. It was 99% human. Okay. So, and the same thing with Sasquatch. Somebody will hit a Sasquatch, and they'll get a piece of flesh on the bumper and take it and get a DNA sample. And the scientist says, "Why'd you give this to me? It's clearly a human." Right. And so over and over you see it. And so, human beings are much more wildly varied than we like to think. I was driving, here in the country one night about 2 a.m. and I didn't know what it was at the time. I'd later learned it's called a rake. And RAKE. And I saw an 8 foot tall, completely naked, paper white, weighed about 90 pounds, I would say, run across the road in front of me, right? Completely naked, bald, no hair, right? Big, huge eyes, right? And it was human. It was a human. I don't know where he lives or where he came from. I got freaked out and I got on the internet and I found out other people had seen the same thing, right? So it's like this, it's like huge varieties. Marco Polo in his travels went to an island of dog-headed people. He says it. He has a drawing in his thing of a dog. It's a guy with a man's body and a dog head, right? And human hands. And there were hundreds of them. And Anubis is a man of the dog's head. So there's the reports of dogmen going back in centuries. And there's a lot of other weird creatures out there. And we stay at home and we stay on the trails when we go out. And we really, if you think about it, 90% of the earth never had a human being walk on it. People don't go deep into the woods. I don't. I mean, I'm too damn terrified to go deep into the woods. I go on the trail. I stay on the trail though, but I mean, there's hundreds of acres around me that nobody's in, right? Anything could be in there. So anything. And, and again, the caverns are much more immense than we know or think. There was a book, it was put out by John Dean, who the guy that turned Nixon in with his testimony. And he wrote a book, and in the book, near the end, he said one of his favorite things to do was to listen to the CIA agent resident in the White House talk about the caverns that are all under New Mexico and Arizona, right? These huge caverns, he said, that are under. It's right in a legitimate, New York Times best-selling book, right? So yeah, they don't want.
I think that they're all over the United States. These caverns and tunnels, they're basically everywhere, especially in Utah. Utah has a lot of underground caverns, and here too in Colorado as well.
Oh, if I get up at 2 a.m. and I lay down, and I have tile floor, and I lay down on the tile floor, and I just put my ear up against it, I can hear a machine going. I hear I have no idea what it is, because literally there's nothing around me anywhere, right? Yeah. So I have no idea what's going on underneath me, but I can hear it.
Yeah, that's incredible. So one last thing before I let you go, I wanted to speak on the World's Fairs here a little bit, because I don't think people really realize how the World's Fairs really kind of shaped our reality in the programming aspects and the social engineering aspects of it. A lot of people, when they talk about the World's Fairs, they kind of like to concentrate on the lost history, which there is a lot of lost history, right? They built those fairs up on pre-existing structures and they tore them all down. But I think what is really important about it is the social engineering aspect of it, because when you research the World's Fairs, a lot of things came out of those World's Fairs that we are currently doing today. Social engineering.
They definitely were. They were shaping the future for sure, and they're just, some of it's just bizarre, bringing in cowboys and Indians to have wars against each other in theater. And people don't realize President McKinley was shot and killed at the Buffalo Fair. There's just a lot of strange stuff that actually happens at the fair. I don't believe, just so the record is straight, I have done a deep dive, especially in the Chicago World's Fair, and there were no buildings there in Jackson Park. Jackson Park completely burned down in the Great Fire of 1871. There's ships off the harbor with people doing sketches of all the trees in Jackson Park burning up. Chicago completely burned down in 1871, the worst fire in U.S. history. So any buildings that had been there would have been all burnt down. So that's a misnomer. I believe that the World's Fairs were just plaster sets. I know they were. I've done a deep dive on them that were later used by Cecil B. DeMille in Hollywood when he did Egypt and Rome. And they spray paint them. And that's why it's the White City, because they all had different colors. So they just painted it all white to make it look good. But the aspect that you're talking about with the World's Fair, that really does fascinate me, and how the social engineering of the World's Fairs essentially created the 20th century. Essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. Like getting people in lines, giving them tickets, exchanging their money for certain prize. You know what I mean? Like it's
Oh
all.
yeah, and they were issuing passports. You had to get a passport to go to a World's Fair. What's that about? They were data mining. It was just early data mining. That's all this was. It was data. Oh, let's get 2 million people coming here. Let's get all our information, right? So they forced a passport. You had to fill out a whole form and get your picture taken. And they're like, oh, wow, they're doing data mining. It was incredible. So yeah, the World's Fairs were really strange, and then they just ended. I mean, they put on some later that weren't very good, but by the time I think we hit San Francisco in 1905 or 1910 or whatever that was, that's sort of the end. So it went for almost 100 years. They started out in Paris and New York and Montreal, and they kind of swept across the United States. Even my hometown of Omaha had one. I was like, I could hardly believe that we didn't even get taught this in school or anything, that Omaha had a World's Fair that had 2 million people visit Omaha. Omaha was a cow town. It's like, what? What is going on here? Right. And again, the whole thing of bringing people. So World's Fair were also the first time that European Americans got to really see other races besides, the slaves in the South and the Native Americans. They brought people from the Philippines, and they kept them like in cages and stuff. It's really funny, and not funny, but I mean, and so it was almost like some kind of weird museum. These World Fairs were, and again, electricity was introduced in all these World Fairs for the first time. Chicago World's Fairs where electricity for the first time was introduced, and blew everybody's mind away. And they could walk around at night with all these dazzling lights, and that introduced the electric future. The amount of waste that those World Fairs did is a crime, though. I got to tell you, we were a wasteful country. That's all I can say.
Where did all these people stay, though, Jay? If there was millions of people there, where did they stay?
There's no way in Omaha that they could have. I can guarantee you there was maybe 5 hotels in Omaha at the time. It had 80,000 people or something, which is a lot. I was surprised to have that many, but still, how do 80,000 people serve 2 million? And how do the trains carry 2 million people? So it may be exaggerated. That's what I'm thinking. Those numbers may be exaggerated for just effect's sake. They all lost money. So that's the other thing. They didn't make any money. There was no way you could make money. And they all lost millions and millions of dollars, really making you wonder what the whole point of it was. And then just threw everything away. When they're done, just threw it away, all thrown away. And that too is kind of suspicious. So I don't know.
Do you think that they were able to build it up so quick? Because I know that the Chicago's World's Fair was said to have been built in like 2 years, which is completely crazy. Well,
not really. Not if you were doing like a movie set. It wouldn't be. You could build a giant movie set in a year easily. It's just plaster. You're just using a mold. So all the Greek columns are you have a mold. You pour your plaster in, you pull the mold up, pick a column, mold. One mold can make 500 Greek columns, right? It's just plaster. And you have to get rid of it before the rains come because it'll all melt. That's why they moved to Hollywood to do their sets, because it never rains. So Cecil B. DeMille could build these giant sets out in the desert and not have to worry about it raining that night and destroying his set. So that's one of the main reasons that LA became the place to shoot movies, was the no rain factor. So yeah, the sets were just by the way, a lot of the people that built the Chicago World's Fair moved to Hollywood and built sets for Cecil B. DeMille in the 1920s. They got their experience building the World's Fair, and then they took that and they turned it into Hollywood sets. And it was a very lucrative job, by the way, to be able to make giant heads and stuff, and giant sets. Go look at Cecil B. DeMille's silent films. They're unbelievable. They're unbelievable. A giant whole Roman Colosseum with, gladiators and horses and thousands of people in the stands and all out in the Mojave Desert,
Wow, that's incredible. So you don't think that, because a lot of people have theorized that there were much older structures that were there, and then they built this plastered structures on top of much older structures, and then they burn it down to get rid of the evidence that there was much older buildings there?
No, there's at least 60 books on how they built the Chicago World's Fair. So I know I'm right because I read them. It's not like these aren't really well covered. You can see photographs of Jackson Park before 1891. There's no buildings there. Same thing with San Francisco. You can look at the area near the bay where the San Francisco World's Fair was, and you can see pictures before. There was no buildings there. Not to mention all those buildings got destroyed by the earthquake and fire anyway. That's the story that should be looked at, is all the earthquake and fires that occurred in Chicago and San Francisco and Boston and Quebec and New York and St. Louis and Seattle and completely burning down entire cities that are made out of stone, by the way. So that is, the truly fascinating story for me is what caused all of the great fires, and why do they look like they are intelligently designed, right, to hit just certain areas. People don't realize, but the same day that the Chicago fire happened in 1871, there was a gigantic fire in northern Michigan, a gigantic fire in Wisconsin, where hundreds and hundreds of people died, by the way. Terrible fires that swept forests, 100 miles of forest in 20 minutes, all right, killing everything in sight. And these aren't talked about, but these happened all through the 1800s, all the way up into the early 1900s. And I'm going to say that there are people who have looked at the Northern California fires here recently, and there's some pretty weird stuff going on with those fires.
Seems like they're still doing it today, just like they were doing it way back then.
Yeah, got to clear out the poor people so we can get some more real estate freed up.
And buy it all up.
Yeah.
So Bill Gates can have more property that he can own.
Yep. And when they say, as we close here, I just want to ask a question. They say that in 2030 that you will own nothing and be happy, right? So they're implying that we're going to be renting everything. Well, who are we renting it from? Somebody has to be owning it.
Yep, that's exactly, agreed. And it's not, and the people that own it don't have our best interest at heart, and they never have had our best interest at heart.
And they can refuse to rent it to us.
Yeah, based on your social credit score and your carbon footprint.
Yeah, no food for you, dude.
Jay, thank you so much for coming on my show. It was an honor and a privilege. I very much enjoyed it. We covered a lot of different things. I hope people were able to follow along. Let people know where they can find you online.
Yeah, I have a show on YouTube, Reality Check, jayweidner.com, just my name. It has all my articles and stuff. You can watch my films and videos at sacredmysteries.com and or Gaia.com.
I highly recommend people go check out Jay's information. The links will be in the description of the video. For everyone else, thanks for watching and listening. Much love to everyone in the chat. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel out in the YouTube algorithm. Share, subscribe, hit the bell icon as well for notification. The link to my channel on Rokfin is in the description. Sign up over there. Hit the follow button for my premium content. And you can catch this episode and any of my other episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and download them individually to your device for free on Spreaker.com. And remember, we're not only in a spiritual war, but a war on humanity. Stay aware, stay alert, keep loving your heart for everyone, stay safe out there. And if you can see through the illusion, you are the solution. See you guys next time.